presentation as this session is being recorded. Please use the chat function to ask questions, which we'll answer during the dedicated Q&A segment, or you may raise your hand to speak at this time. Firstly, the contents of the seminar today. The introduction to the webinar, legislative requirements in their application. This is the biggest section and makes this webinar different to previous ones. It's being more focused on legislation compliant than just general guidance and updates. 3 observations for compliance performance. That's based on recent issues with renewals of practicing certificates and failure to do so. Regulator process for new and renewed certificates. This overviews recent developments. 5, guidance for certificate holders to be compliant. Still retain this section, but previous presentations cover it more in depth. So refer to them published on our website. And lastly, 6, regulator expectations for compliance best practice. So we're looking to give you a winning formula for being and staying compliant. Introduction to the webinar. Purpose is to inform practice certificate holders and also separate the workshop to follow on from mine operators. Part of the compliance priorities project for the regulator to January to June 24 in response to ongoing issues of some holders and mine operators not being compliant. A question and answer session, as I've mentioned before, but we're not here to debate the merits of the schemes or individual issues. And webinars being recorded, as you've heard. Legislative requirements and their application. Summarises the system that only individuals who are nominated to exercise the function by a mine operator can do so if they meet the requirements set out in Schedule 10. If they cease to meet the requirements, hold a practicing certificate, then they can no longer practice and be nominated. Refer to the fact sheet practicing certificates. Section 133, obligations of mine operators. Summarised here so holders know how they impact on mine operators and with corporate penalties up to 300 units, $33,000. So if the individual does not meet the Schedule 10 requirements, e.g. the practicing certificate has expired and the holder is still practicing, and this is happening, and I'll have more details about that in due course. It's readily available to exercise and capable of exercising the statutory function, e.g. one person exercising, I'll just go back there, exercising the function of different mines or between shifts or across a shift geographically, e.g. deputies inspections. And no more than one individual is nominated to exercise a key statutory function at the mine, e.g. the mining engineer. Section 133 continued. Ensure mining activities do not take place, excepting other mechanical exploration, if the class of mine has a key statutory function where no individual is not nominated to exercise it for more than 7 days. Refer to our guide statutory functions, and the regulator expectation is mine operators will have plans with actions that enable them to nominate alternative holders to cover absences. Section 134. An individual nominated to exercise a statutory function at a mine must, as soon as reasonably practicable, inform the mine operator of a matter that may interfere with the individual's ability to exercise the statutory function. The penalty is indicated there. Other example could include expiry of the practicing certificate or cannot meet the maintenance of competence condition before expiry. Note, for certificate-related matters, nominees can contact the regulator and seek advice on how to address any compliance issues for their certificate. Lastly, 133, eligibility for a practicing certificate, refers to the guide for statutory functions for summary of requirements. Continuing on, Section 140, grant of a practicing certificate. Practice certificate remains in force unless in the council for a period of 5 years commencing on the date at which it's granted. I'll put in there, no extensions. So we have people approach us saying, can I have an extra year, 6 years so I can complete my maintenance of competence? We can't do that under the legislation. B, for a shorter period specified in the practicing certificate. And we haven't done that to date because there's no need. We want to give people the maximum period. More than one practicing certificate may be issued to an individual under this section, whether as a replacement of a renewal of an existing certificate, or we grant a new one before the expiry date, so they may overlap, but not in actual reality. A separate practicing certificate authorising an individual to exercise another statutory function. Now, we have only been issuing one, and then we add functions to it if necessary, such as a person passes a certificate of competence exam, we add that function to the certificate. So you only have one certificate you've got to administer in those scenarios. The interstate practicing certificate, I've put here disregard. There is no such thing existing between ourselves, WA and Queensland. The conditions of practicing certificate, bolded to add emphasis, is the condition of practicing certificate that the holder of the certificate must, if required by the regulator by written notice, do the following with the time frame specified in the notice. Provide specified information relating to the individual's competency, B, knowledge of law and ethics, and C, completed specified training courses, other forms of training. So this is part of the basis of the condition to maintain competency for the certificate holder. Continuing is the condition that the certificate of competence must keep records that demonstrate the individual ability to hold the certificate, including evidence of completion of courses and timesheets. So this is also part of that basis of condition to maintain competency, expanded upon in the Gazette notice. The holder of the practicing certificate must comply with the conditions imposed on the practicing certificate. Suspension or cancellation of practicing certificate. I'm going to refer you to the information sheet, suspending or cancelling a practicing certificate for the regulator approach to this. It's also available at this web address shown here. Note, there's no provision that enables a holder to voluntarily surrender the practicing certificate to specific conditions. The regulator may be able to cancel the certificate if the holder provides one of the grounds under section 143. Holders in these circumstances should email mca@regional.nsw.gov.au to seek resolution. Register of practicing certificates. The regulator must maintain a register of practicing certificates, the register. The purpose of the register is to provide a relevant person with information about the holders of practicing certificates, including the following: the identifying details of the holder, including the name, contact details of the holder, and unique identifier of the holder's practicing certificate. B, the qualifications and skills of the holder. C, the places in which the holder works and has worked. D, details of the practicing certificate of the holder, including its expiry date, conditions. Details of an action under WH's laws in relation to the holder. Now, these details required to be made in the register is partly what the holder must maintain with the regulator as per the condition on the practicing certificate. And that's why I'm showing it to you to see the link between the two. Following on from that, the regulator can store, use, and disclose information for the purpose of the register. 4, the regulator may disclose information on the register to a relevant person if the regulator considers it reasonably necessary to do so, to reduce or control the risk to work, to health and safety of a person, including individual outside New South Wales. In this section, certification agent means the board, that is the New South Wales Mining Petroleum Competence Board. B, an agency in another Australian jurisdiction that exercises functions in relation to the certification of the competency of workers in mines, including the following agencies: Resources Safety Health Queensland, Government WA, Department of Mines Industry Regulation and Safety. They're the main, obviously, jurisdictions we deal with. Now, a request from interstate regulator that may justify disclosure could be a holder has an interstate certificate under mutual recognition that is being investigated for their work health and safety competence. 5, relevant persons that can access the register means the following: a certification agent, which is like ourselves, or operator of a mine or petroleum site, an industry safety and health representative, a mine safety and health representative, a person exercising a similar function to a function described in paragraphs A to D in another jurisdiction. So typical requests enabled under the above are mine operators, HR staff, emailing our address to confirm that a prospective employee holds a practicing certificate. Note, it does not enable disclosure in employment agencies or reference checking agencies. They must supply a consent form from the holder, regardless if they're acting on behalf of the mine operator. Observations for compliance performance. So some people registering for a user account on the Resources Regulator portal to apply are leaving it too late, so rushing put unreasonable expectations on us to deliver. 2, reapply multiple times. C, not responding to email with the requested ID documents to prevent identity fraud and ensure privacy, while the documents are not certified as true copies of the originals. Not checking their emails for regulator communication in the process. Not following the instructions in email what next to do. Ringing the mining and competency team because they have not done one or more of the parts of the above. Also, we're seeing applying an incorrect online application form or pay the incorrect fee, requiring us to refund the differences in most cases. Now, there is sufficient guidance on the regulator website to guide through the people through the process easily and quickly, e.g. the help guide, navigating to the Mine Workers portal on the applying or renew practicing certificate webpage. If still in doubt, then they can email our address or phone 1300 8414 609, options 2, then 3. Compliance while holding a practicing certificate, maintenance of competence. The report for 2023 audits of holders, soon to be published, has similar findings to the 22 report with a few exceptions. Around a 33% increase in requests, 206 in total, to audit 100 holders, due in the main to email bounce backs or ignoring the requests being from a contractor, despite the fact sheet attached verifying their email address and details. But the outcomes are comparative to 2022, with 82% substantially conforming and a new category of 4% totally conforming, which is pleasing to see. The types and numbers of non-conformances were similar, but slightly less in total. The 14% substantially non-conforming mostly had far more hours than required in extensive logs, but did not again apply the requirements to what they claimed, e.g. the learning was not eligible. Did not meet the requirements. 6 had not completed the learning from disasters training, which I believe has been out there for some time and well known throughout the industry. Not seeing consistent evidence of individuals interacting with their mine operator or employer in a systemised way to plan their learning to maintain competence, instead of just whatever and whenever to comply, and or checking on their progress to ensure they are and will be compliant with their certificate conditions, and or ensure they renew and have a new certificate prior to the former one expiring. Now, these observations in this last dot point are based on a review of 48 maintenance of competence logs for individuals applying for a new practicing certificate after their previous one expired, and that's since September 2023 to the 20th of March today. They are mainly first-line supervisors, but there are some managers sprinkled through them as well. So take stock of those findings. The report will be published shortly, and there's benefit in actually being across those. Lastly, the holding and renewing of practicing certificates. Some holders doing more or one or more of the following. So just go along with me here and see whether you are doing these things or not. Have not read in action the expiry date on their certificate or the conditions, apart from the regulator and mine operator assisting with this. This includes not identifying their employer had incorrectly recorded their expiry date. Not maintaining their contact details with the regulator. So they don't receive a reminder email 3 months prior to expiry and an expiry, and then say it's the regulator fault they did not renew. The email from our portal address, New South Wales Resources Regulator at service-now.com, goes to their spam folder. They don't monitor the email address and miss the reminder and expiry emails. Don't apply when reminded and leave it to the last moment, sometime not being able to practice for a period until the new one is granted. Certificates expires and they're still practicing in the function nominated. So the regulator process is to refresh on this for people's benefit. Applying for a new practicing certificate. The process is unchanged for a new certificate for the first time. If a person could have applied in the implementation period for practicing certificates to 1 October 2020, then an additional condition to complete 20% more MOC in the first year of the certificate may be imposed by the regulator. There are additional steps now for a person applying when their previous certificate has expired. as it was thought that some were avoiding the compliant declaration in the renewal application. A Section 155 notice under the Work Health and Safety Act is served, requiring the person to provide information records to demonstrate compliance. The person has to provide a response within 6 weeks, otherwise their application is closed off. Response requires the person to show that they have and will satisfy the law and conditions, including they have not been practising after the expiry date, a log of learning for MOC during the expired certificate and since, to show that they are complying with that condition. Moving on to renewing a practising certificate, planning. Refer to the 14th June 2023 webinar presentation for steps and screenshots to renew as it is covered in full. The Apply or Renew Practising Certificate webpage also provides guidance for the life cycle of holding a practising certificate. You may renew your practising certificate up to 6 months prior to the expiry date. The Resources Regulator portal will email a reminder to your email address on our records 3 months prior to expiry. Most holders now have a user account for the Resources Regulator portal, but for those who don't, allow a time of at least 1 week to register for one, providing ID documents. If you don't follow the process and instructions, then you risk wasting very valuable time and delays. The regulator will generally process applications with payment within 3 weeks, but it can be longer. Like at the moment, we're going through the renewal phase for deputies and the numbers are much larger in volume. You may apply up until the day prior to expiry, and we can backdate a new certificate issue, but there will be a period where you'll not be able to practice as you don't have a current practising certificate. And clearly we want to avoid this by holders applying much earlier. Renewing a practising certificate changes. The renewals application has amended sections for declaring whether you are to meet the conditions on your practising certificates. It requires you to answer yes or no to the questions. This is an extract from the portal, the application for renewal, and it's an example of the MOC condition where if the person answers no, like shown here, they then have to provide sufficient details in the box below, which I'm circling over with my cursor, as to why and what they will do to be compliant with the new certificate. And in this case, the person supplied a log attached at the bottom of the application, which is provisioned to generally attach documents. Otherwise, we may have asked for that log. So that's now what you've got to be doing if you let your certificate expire. If you renew and you say no to MOC condition, this is what you will need to go through. For maintaining contact details question, the example below, they've answered yes. And that's what it looks like within the form. So there's no problems. If you tick yes to both questions, it'll just go through the processing of it. Obviously, if you tick no, and I'll go with the tip here. If you have not, like no, have not maintained your contact details, then before you actually go into applying for renewal, update your contact details by following the steps in the previous section or the section to come. Then you can declare you've been compliant. Only just, but you have been. Just to finish off, we have proposed to send an SMS text at the same time as a reminder email in the near future as part of some systems upgrades. So again, this is crucial that you keep a current mobile phone contact with us. Okay, so moving to guidance for certificate holders compliance. Here's a sample of a PC expiry date and standard conditions. And that's an extract. The grant date and expiry date shown there with the 5-year period, and these are standard conditions on most of your practising certificates. Now, tip, note the expiry date in your personal record systems to remind you to renew 6 months prior, and cross-check that against an employer or mine operating management system for the date they have. Follow links here, if you need to the Maintenance of Competence Gazette, which is a nice short summary of what the actual requirements are. Or you can go to our webpage for the Maintenance of Competence. Now, on the Maintenance of Competence webpage, the guidance, and the address is shown there. I want to make a couple of clarifying points. Apps are not owned or operated by the Resources Regulator. So we were asked to provide input and our requirements to those app developers. And since then, they do come back to us at times and ask for clarifications on things. But we don't access records through it. We don't have any connection with it at all. So people need to address that with the app providers. At the same time, we're here to provide guidance like we're doing today. So we're not expecting app providers to do the guides, things that we're doing. That's something that the regulator does. But there's a clear distinction between the two. My next point is using an app or spreadsheet without understanding and applying what is required may mean you have a higher risk of being found substantially non-conforming in an audit. So you still need to have that knowledge to about apply, because the app or spreadsheet may not stop for you from incorrectly claiming something, is my experience in reviewing people's logs. Guidance available on the MOC webpage. The Guide to Maintenance of Competence, as shown here on the right, read it in full at least once. Then refer to it as necessary for sections like the areas of competence, the learning hours, learning types requirements. I'm going to especially mention 7.4.1, which is the criteria for formal training courses. You need to address that in your evidence or in your description that you provide in your log. A lot of providers with QR codes are doing a very good job making sure all the details are actually in the automatic upload of the description of the activity to the app. But you need to make sure that you're aware of that criteria and are applying with it, because it'll be picked up in an audit if you don't. 7.4.3 is good because it says what we don't accept. That's good to know as well. The other document on the Maintenance of Competence webpage is FAQ, and that's been built up from inquiries from holders. E.g., can I claim attendance at pre-shift meetings and toolbox talks? Now, I'm not going to give you the answer. I prefer you to actually have the ability to go in, look at the FAQ, look up that question if you don't know the answer, and then you're sure what you can go ahead and can claim in the future, which is not automatically just because it's one of those two things that's claimable. Webinar presentations and copies of previous ones. For example, the one on 14th of June last year is still current. It's still very valuable information in that, if you haven't already seen it. Maintenance of competence guidance continue. Now, the regulator recommended logbook. It's only recommended, so it's not mandatory, but to use it, refer to these worksheets that I'm going to raise with you. Firstly, the summary of types of formal and informal learning. Any caps on hours can be claimed, and options for evidence to keep. So this is an extract, and it may not be easy for you to see, but very briefly, you have on the second left-hand column the learning types, formal and informal. The middle column here, highlighted in yellow, is your caps on something. The ones with yellow highlight have caps, and actually the other ones do, like seminars as well, but they really highlight those ones. Then you have the evidence required in order of preference. So as you see here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 different types of evidence that you could have that would satisfy our requirements. So it's not just one thing like a certificate. It can be an email registration, a payment. So there's plenty of flexibility in what the evidence, but this is a nice, easy reference worksheet. Instead of having to go to the guide, there's 9 pages about different types of learning and caps and evidence, to have it in a worksheet. And I actually copied this example from a mindset that the training person actually developed this. The regulator logbook continued the self-assessment for conformance to maintenance of competence requirements, and that's based on criteria used in audits. So here's the example, and it's just an extract of one of the questions. Are you on track, or have you complied at the end of the certificate period? And the guidance is areas of learning satisfy the total hours for each, minimum of 1/3 for mining, work health and safety systems, and so on. Your response, okay, you can self-assess yourself. Have I satisfied that? Yes or no? If no, detail actions to correct it, and then action completed to tick it off that you've done that. Why this is so critical is if you do this for yourself at any point, then you can actually give yourself some assurance that you actually are satisfying the requirements. So if you ask for an audit the next day, then you can go into that process thinking, well, I know that I've used the criteria that the auditors are going to use, so therefore I should be fairly confident of my conformance through that auditing process. The other benefit of using this worksheet is for before you go to renew your practicing certificate, because the condition question for maintenance of competence asks you to say, do you believe you're being compliant with the maintenance of competence condition, and declaring that. If you do the self-assessment sheet, then you can take stock that, okay, well, I think I actually am complying, and I can say that confidently. So that's something that's going to help you if you want to go into that process with that sort of confidence. This is the next couple of slides here about the condition to maintain work details with the regulator. And these are slides from last year's 14th of June presentation. So I'm not going to go through them because you can go back and look at that webinar and it will go step you through it step by step. I provided here just so you have it for ease of reference. And this first slide here, for example, I don't know why I've got that. All of a sudden, those options at the top. But anyway, we'll keep on rolling. So this is all about a login, okay, to get onto the regulator portal and to be able to go in and update your contact details. This is the page. I'm going to try to move this back down out of the way. So updating contact work to details on the portal. So this is, again, the steps on the right-hand side, and where you go to, as I'm highlighting here, to update your contact details. And this is the last page. This is what you will go through with the form. And I've actually opened it up and said, yes, you can change your personal contact details there. You may note that the email address is not there because we don't allow you to do that through this process, because if you do that, you're changing your login. So you need to email cau@regional.nsw.gov.au so that we can update your email address. But assuming your email address is up to date already, that you can go ahead and update skills and qualifications, places of work, and so on. So that's the process to update your contact details. And it's automated, so you can do it anytime you get off a shift at midnight. You can jump on, do these details. Not that I'm saying you want to do it that time of night, but it is possible with the electronic portal. Regulation expectations for compliance best practice. So the guidance available on the Practicing Certificates Overview webpage, refer address above. The flyer on Practicing Certificates Check on Progress was issued in April 2021, as pictured here. And it's current as an overview of steps for mine operators, employers, and holders. And refer to when actioning the best practices in the slides that follow, but it does not cover all the points. Okay, first best practice. Have your own personal system to note your expiry date on receipt of a new certificate and put in reminders to renew it. That will complement any employer system and the regulator's reminders, and possibly be a second control for the risk of failing to renew. Maintain current contact and work details on the Resources Regulator pod and add its email address, New South Wales Resources Regulator at service-now.com and mca@regional.nsw.gov.au to your email software senders list. Plan the maintenance of competence learning so it meets their needs and requirements, again in tandem with any employer system. Regularly download and check the log of learning from an app, employer, or their own. Don't wait to an audit, and keep a backup copy just in case. It's too important not to have something to back you up. Do a self-assessment of conformance to the maintenance of competence scheme using the regulator recommended spreadsheet to check progress, so to be confident in the event of an audit. Be a subscribe to the regulator Mine Safety News to receive any updates on any changes and new guidance. That's found on our website. I would like to give you the address for that, but it's fairly easy. If you type in Mine Safety News, you'll get to the subscription page. If in doubt, refer to our website guidance and then email your query to MCA Regional, and we'll give you a response in writing to refer to, and with a phone call if necessary. There's an address that's shown there for you. Conclusion. This is almost identical to the 2023 webinar, except that denoted in red. Firstly, the regulator is overall satisfied with the current levels of clients being demonstrated for the majority of individuals and mine operators for practicing certificates and maintenance of competence. The exceptions are individuals not keeping their contact and work details current with us via the portal. That's critical for renewal reminders and audits. Renewing their practicing certificate until just before the expiry date or after, because they and possibly the mine operator nominating don't have a system to ensure this occurs so the holder can practice continuously. Individuals practicing without a current certificate, because in those instances, the mine operator system has also failed to prevent it. So just to keep you informed, the evaluation of the gazetted maintenance of competence public consultation response is being progressed by the regulator through the New South Wales Mining and Petroleum Competence Board as part of their 24 to 26 strategic plan, and that may yield improvements to benefit holders and stakeholders. The ongoing requirement to complete learning from disasters training is also being considered as part of that. So stay tuned. If you're waiting to see whether that's going to be a requirement in your next period of the next or your current practicing certificate, you've done it for your previous certificate, I've been advising people to wait until the outcome of this process to see what is going to be required for that going forward. Holders and stakeholders are encouraged to continue engaging with the resources regulator in a timely manner to resolve issues arising from them or clarifying requirements with the contact details below, which effectively is MCA regional.nsw.au and also our 1300 number 814609 options 2 then 3. Okay, so thanks for attending. Pretty well on time. I've got at least 12 minutes plus to ask questions. Camilla's going to facilitate that. You can ask a question by raising a hand via the Zoom function or placing a question in the chat. Just while you're doing that, I just want to acknowledge Camilla. She's from our engagement team. And I know it's our job to provide these services, but Camilla was on the line with me last night at 9 p.m, putting the final polish to these presentations. And I can't acknowledge that sort of dedication any more than I have now. So over to you, Camilla.
Thank you, Andy, and apologies everyone for the passcode issue that some of you have encountered this morning. Andy, we've got a question in the chat from Stacey McDonald. The question is, it has been noted from a lot of our PC holders that when attending the resource regulator seminars, conferences, the formal learning evidence hasn't been provided to participants to capture as evidence. It used to be on the side decks at the start, who the presenter was, the qualification, etc., whereas it has been reported that this is no longer shown. Can you provide some guidance on this and how they can obtain this information if the regulator isn't providing it?
Yeah, okay, so I'm making a note for an action item for me to go back and it's not on our events people that we need to be inputting those sorts of things to. Obviously, we do the QR code, but I take your point that there's also the evidence of the details of the presenter, like you've mentioned, and so on. So that's something that if we haven't been doing it, then we need to be, and we look at how we can correct that so people can have that evidence provided to them. So I will look into that and we'll get a remedy for that so that we are showing best practice as well and providing the information which we should be through our forum. So that's something on me as well to ensure that's happening through the various events and that sort of thing.
Okay, and we've got Adrian Short with his hand raised. Adrian, you've been unmuted, so you should be able to ask your question.
Yes, good morning. I'm just wondering, why can't the regulator develop an app so that we don't have to use a third party to log our MOC?
Yeah. So Adrian, the decision was made in the formative of the system to not go down the road of having an app provided by the regulator. And that was then, and there was reasons for that at that point of time, which I won't go through because it's not the time. So instead, it was kept at a very low level that we provided a regulated logbook. I know that logbook has been revised over time, so if you had to use that initially, that by now that's quite a different looking log. There's no onus on you to have to update your log to the current version, but you can use it. So there's no plans. The apps are out there in the marketplace, and they can be a choice for somebody to choose to or not. But we have given the option that you can just do a simple Excel spreadsheet, acknowledging there's benefits obviously in using the apps. So that's where we land at the moment. I'll finish off by saying that our cousins over the ditch in New Zealand actually did that. They started and they provided an app and people were utilising it. I now understand that they no longer provide that app in New Zealand. So they've gone back to not providing an app and administering through their own processes. They're doing it by the processes of ours that they simply have guidance and logbooks that people can use for those New Zealand practice certificates of competence. So hopefully that answers enough your question, Adrian.
Thank you.
We've also got Henry with his hand raised. Henry, did you want to ask your question?
We just actually put our question in writing, but basically it's about the audits and are they occurring at the moment? And if they're not, when are the next round scheduled for audits?
Sure. Thanks, Henry. So they were, the plan was to be starting at the start of the calendar year. That's been delayed in my area. So some simple means that we've just got to get a procurement action completed to continue outsourcing that to contractors through an open tender forum. So at this point, I don't envisage we'll be doing any more audits until the next financial year, 24-25, and that would be probably in Q1, late Q1 or early Q2. We'll continue on with the basis of the numbers of 100 audits at least being completed, and that will be continue to be across functions. The last round of audits we did, we focused more on the larger groups like your deputies, OCS, and that sort of thing. Given this year, that volume basis, that's what we'll continue to do, focus more on the larger groups in terms of the total number, but we'll continue to do audits across all functions, but less of them for the smaller type groups of practicing certificates like electrical engineering manager, for example. So yes, next financial year, end of Q1, begin Q2, and then ongoing for the main financial year.
The next question, what are the typical shortfalls that people not working have in maintaining their competency?
Did you say typical shortfalls or?
Yes, typical shortfalls.
I have to recall, because I reviewed these last 48 logs for the people who had let their certificate expired. Best of my recollection, what I see, they don't have the opportunities, if they're not practicing in the functional mine site, they don't have opportunities potentially, depending on their role that they do, to some of those informal learnings like risk assessment or reviewing a control plan or principal hazard, unless, for example, they're a consultant, what they do for their business. So it's more that I probably would make that observation that generally they have less opportunities for those informal types of learning. Having said that obviously there is still opportunities that are out there to do other types of learning, more formal type material. So, for example, seminars, conferences, formal training courses, and such things. So it's probably just the individual circumstances of which types of learning they can select from, given their roles and what they're doing. I'd just add, probably not exactly that, but sort of related, that I do have people from time to time that they have a New South Wales practice certificate, they're moved into state, and then we go to audit them, and then they say, well, look, I can't fulfill my maintenance of competence because I've been practicing in a different state. Being in a different geographic location doesn't change that you don't have opportunities to have access formal learning. I've used the example to people and forums that you could go to Chile and working in mining over there or something else, and you could still have things like risk assessment. You could still claim those things. So interstate, overseas, it doesn't matter where you do it, you can still claim it. So it's fairly flexible. So I think people need to take an expansive view of what they can possibly claim. For example, if you do a risk assessment course, I had somebody recently just, and they gone off into a different industry, and I said to them, well, you can do a risk assessment course. That's formal learning. That qualifies for what you do for mining for your certificate. So it's just being expansive in your thinking, and we have been more liberal as we've learned from experience what we accept these days. Okay, so I think that people can be rest assured that generally, as long as you can see it in the guide, as long as you can see it in that spreadsheet worksheet that I've shown you today, a list of those things, and you can match it, you can claim it. So hopefully that helps you, best as I can give you an idea.
Okay. Thanks, Andy. Here's another question here. Just confirming that at this stage, until the review of the MOC system, the learning from disasters component for the current 5 years will be determined and communicated when completed, and we don't need to redo the learning from disaster training, which was previously rolled out.
Right. So are you asking me, is that the case? Question, is it, Camilla?
I believe so.
Yeah. So no, it hasn't been decided upon. It's still with the regulator. We're still evaluating. Well, we've evaluated the submissions to a point, and we're now determining our response, which will go back to the next meeting of the Competence Board about what potentially are the responses to the submissions, feedback, and that will be, as part of that, will be about learning from disasters. Whether it will be a requirement ongoing, that will be determined. So if people are so there's a couple of obviously different scenarios for different circumstances. So I'll try to be as clear as this as possible. If you're in a practicing certificate and you're in, say, year 4 and you haven't done that disasters training, I would say get on and do it. Because I don't believe that, and maybe it's year 5 is a better example, but it's a requirement now and it should be done. So that's in that scenario. Another scenario would be that you've done it in your first certificate in the first 5 years, and you just started the second one and you're in year 1, 2 or something like that. That's okay. You can wait and see what the outcome of this evaluation of the competence scheme is. So I want to, hopefully by sharing those scenarios, support people that they don't put themselves in a situation that if the outcome is, for example, that no, it's continuing to be a requirement for everybody every 5 years, and the actual package, I'm actually in the process with a contractor to revise the case studies in that. We just did that because we had an opportunity to do that. We wanted to update the case studies for all the 3 programs, not just the program 3, the 7 hours, 1 day type course. So I would say to people, if you need to get it done, because where you're at with those different things on the timeline, go and do it. Go and see a provider. They're available on the list on our website. I've approved training providers, and you can get it done. If you don't have that, you don't have to get it done right now, then okay, you can wait. And I can't put an exact timeline on when these changes be, because that's not my decision, but it'll be timely. It is a body of work that we're looking to complete during this year with the Competence Board. And once that process is properly done, then there'll be an extensive communication strategy about what those changes are and how people can go forward and meet them. And obviously learning from disasters will be covered in that. So we're at that stage, unfortunately, but we do need to work with what your realities are for your individual circumstances. I'm happy for people to email me through the MCA, the regional address, to put their particular circumstances to me if they want some more assurance or clarity around that. Have that answer the question.
On that same thread, Andy, we've got a question from Andrew Flynn and also Ben Withers, which ties in together. Andrews is asking, what do you recommend to undertake to cover off this requirement of emergency management learning if that learning from disasters course is removed to continuously repeated? And Ben has asked on the same thread, for those who have done LFD for a second time and the requirement is removed, will those hours still count towards the total cap?
Okay, so let me unpack that. So the first question was about, Camilla, just to get clear.
Yep, so if the learning from disasters course is removed to be continuously repeated, What do you recommend to undertake to cover off this requirement of emergency management learning?
Yeah, so if it wasn't required, you could still do learning from disasters. Right? That has implications, obviously, for emergency management. So that will still be out there. There'll still be approved training providers. So, and that could be a decision by an individual or a mine operator. They want to continue to have that as part of their learning for disasters, to keep that corporate knowledge and the benefit of individuals, to keep that constant in our minds. Other things, obviously, emergency management, emergency exercises. That's the type of learning you can claim. That's the scenarios playing out. Training, formal training courses in emergency management, we also allowed for under the scheme. So, yeah, I think there's plenty of avenues to be able to do learning that's still related to emergency management, which could still include learning from disasters. It may not be mandatory. So that's an option for you. So hopefully that's okay. The second part of the question was, Camilla?
For those who have done learning from disasters for a second time and the requirement is removed, will those hours still count towards the total cap?
Yes.
Great. And then I guess continuing on with that thread is, if it is updated, will it be a requirement to complete the new version for this 5-year period?
Yep. So watch this space and wait for it. We'll to see what's decided as part of the evaluation. What will be the requirement, if any, going forward? I can't crystal ball that at this stage.
Okay, we've got Dennis Black. With your presentation showed a spreadsheet summary of the MOC section subsections to summarise eligible activities. Is such a summary readily available for RR to distribute to practising certificate holders?
Okay, so Dennis, was it? I think you're referring to the recommended logbook for the worksheets contained within that, with the summary of learning types. Is that correct, Dennis? Open up your mic and clarify for me. I've got the name right as well, or just put it in the chat.
Dennis, do you want to unmute and respond to that question? He said yes, Andy. Okay.
So that's available on the Maintenance of Competence webpage. So my response to this point is, I'd rather you have that address in one of your favorites and you go there and you pick up that recommended spreadsheet, logbook, which is at the bottom of the page. And there's a couple of other documents there that could also be of benefit. So I think there's merit in going to the actual page and then picking up that through there, or other things as well. I do want to be more active, actually sending things to people potentially through their email addresses on our register. But that's just a question of resources at the time to get that done. And because this reinforces the message today, when we do send out emails to the email addresses of practicing certificate holders, we get hundreds of bounce backs. So then I've got the work to actually go in and actually manage that and sort of say, well, why are these addresses not going through and they're bouncing back? So yes, I've suggested, Dennis, the best way, go to the website with the address that I've provided in this presentation and have a look at that page and have it in your favourites, have a look every so often.
Okay, and the last question we've got in the chat is from Ben Withers. When being audited by Resources Regulator for attendance at an RR event where RR staff check attendees in, is the onus still on the PC holder to gather further evidence of attendance?
No. What we do is surveil after the person enters the particular event, is on us as the regulator. I know there was previous practice, which were great practices, that was checked by the actual organizer event from the regulator to make sure people were being present, not just logging in and logging back off again, which is one of the concerns we have about online forums. We think it's a great way of delivering so people can always get to attend, but there's also a reality that to make sure people aren't claiming for things if they're not actually attending in full. So that's another thing with a area of events that we probably need to be stronger, I'll admit, and surveilling that. So I'm pleased you've raised it so that I can probably take that back and have a closer look at it within our processes as well. So thanks for the question.
That's all we have thus far. Anyone else want to raise a hand or ask a question?
Okay, great. Well, I do hope that we have been able to give you some material today that will be of benefit as you move forward. We are on this journey together, and the regulator sees its role to ensure that people do have current practicing certificates, and we will continue to provide support like this for this compliance priority project, but also other activities that we're doing to make sure that people are practicing with current certificates and they are meeting their conditions. You have our contact details if you need to clarify individual circumstances or issues. All the best with it. Thank you.
Thank you.